Thank you for joining us in the review of the No Place Like Home project's SRI. So here is the hcd.ca.gov website. This is where you will be downloading the latest version of the SRI. So you'll go over to Grants and Funding. Scroll down to Reporting and Compliance Loan Programs. Select. And here you'll find number 2, Schedules of Rental Income. And it'll be the first selection here. And there's also past training videos and the occupancy standard exception checklist if needed. So it's important to click on the link and download the SRI directly onto your desktop and save it. Okay. When you open the SRI, you will see on the top of the SRI something that says Enable Report. You'll click on that, and then a pink ribbon will populate. That is for you to enable the macros. Okay. We do have an SRI here that's already pre-filled out to assist in this review. But to enable macros, you will go to the Instructions tab, scroll all the way down, and there'll be instructions on how to enable the macros depending on your computer or computer program that you are using. Okay. So, and before starting the SRI, it's important to read through the instructions here thoroughly to get an understanding of how to completely fill out the SRI. Okay. I will be going over tab 1, checklist and certification, right now. So here it's good to know that all the yellow sections, that is to completed by the sponsor. Okay. So here, RA, how many RA numbers are there? There's one, only one to populate. If there's more than one, you see there's 2 RA numbers, an extra line will populate to reach input the other RA number for the project. Then enter city, county. There's be a drop down, so you can select from all the counties down here. Sponsor name, property management agent, the preparer's number, phone number, and the fiscal year. So it'll be 2026, 2025, 2024. Okay, and the report period will be depending on the project report, but usually it's January 1st to December 31st, and the total number of units that the project has. Okay. Section B is the funding of the project, basically the program. Since this is for NPLH, it will be under here in this section. You'll select a yes. Okay, so usually you'll pop that no. When it's no, section C and D does not populate. But once you select yes, you would notice that C and D populates, as well as the MHP Family Income and Rent Limits tab. Okay, that's so you know that macros is supposed to be functioning correctly. If the project has any of the other funding down here, please answer. If it's no, just go ahead and put no for all. Okay. Down to utility allowance chart. Excuse me. If the project does not have a utility allowance, you can go ahead and leave it blank. If there is a utility allowance, the UA chart is required to be submitted with the SRI. Okay, we do have some examples, an example of how the UA chart can look like. So this is an example that will say is from the, this county, and it's also highlighted to show the allowances that are given to the tenants and number of bedrooms, how much total down here. So for this one bedroom is $43, 2 bedroom is $56. What you'll do, go in here, one bedroom, enter 43, 2 bedroom, enter 56. And that will also pre-populate in tab 2 as well for you. If the project has more than one building with different utility charts, you will follow the instructions here in section D, okay? And then checklist of required items. This is to be completed once all these tabs are done. Okay, you'll go back to this checklist and answer the questions. If you answer no to any questions, please put an exclamation as to why your answer is a no. And then don't forget to certify sponsor name, sponsor type, which is management agent, borrower, sponsor, name, title, date, number, and email address. Okay. And the screen section is for HCD use only. Next, we will be going to the MHP Family and Rent Limits tab. There you go. This income rent limits calculator is here to assist in the determination of the rents and income limits for the project to help with the AMI income rent limits. So number one will be auto-populated when tab 1 is filled out. You'll answer, is this a tax credit project? Yes or no? And if it's yes, you'll enter the placed in service date. Okay, so this one is 12/23/24, and you are required to submit supporting documentation to verify that PIS date. Okay, so for example, they use a temporary certificate of occupancy, and so here we have the TCO, and the date was 12/23/24, and it is entered here 12/23/24. Okay, this also lists other examples that you can use. IRS Form 8609, CO, all this down here. Okay, an example of the 8609 looks like this, and line 5 is where you can find the PIS date for the project. Okay. And the same goes for the gross rent floor date. Here is put 6/15/22, and the TCAC project staff report 4% was used to verify that's the supporting documentation for the project, which is this. And the date was June 15, 2022, and that date is entered here, June 15, 2022. Okay. This income and rent limits will pre-populate in tab 2 to show the limits for the project. Now I will hand it off to my colleague who will review tabs 2 and 3.
Thank you, Susanna. Okay, so I'll be going over tabs 2 and 3. Tab 2 is the assisted and restricted units. This is the information tab in which you will be listing all units to indicate who all is residing at the property. I will go through and I'll do kind of an overview of all the different columns. Most of them are self-explanatory, such as column A. Here's where you'll be entering the unit numbers. And then for column B, there is a change to column B. So you'll be utilizing the drop down and selecting M to indicate which is the manager's unit. But also column B will now also be, so column B and column AO over here have been updated to also provide options for selecting rent increase waiver status. If you're needing further clarification or guidance, sponsors can seek out additional instructions and information through the AMC issued AB 846 memo. And any guiding documents posted on the HCD website will also be available, or you may reach out to your occupancy representative for assistance if you have any more questions on that. For column C, This is where you will be entering the household ID, which must be a number unique to your tenant. You cannot use the tenant's name nor their social security number. This is a public document, so there cannot be any identifying information. Also, be sure no two tenants should have the same ID so that we can distinguish one tenant from another as tenants move out and new tenants move in. Let's see in the next column for column D. This is where you will be entering the number of persons in the household. If the unit is under occupied, it will be highlighted yellow. I made an example here. You see it's a 2-bedroom unit and there's only one person in there. So it is under occupied. If that is the case, then you should scroll over to the right and enter the reason for the compliance issue. So that highlighted yellow. However, you will enter something such as, this tenant has an occupancy exemption on file, tenant has a live-in aid, or whatever the reason may be. Okay. And then so for column E, self-explanatory, you'll be entering the number of bedrooms for each unit. And then for column F, you'll be entering the tenant's move-in date. And for column G, you'll be entering the household income recertification date. So HCD does require that you recertify the tenant once every 12 months. So this information needs to be updated and entered here. The SRI certification tab on tab 1. So when you're certifying the SRI, when you're completing it, this date here is linked to this date here. So if it's been over 12 months, like you see this one, this SRI example was certified 10/10/2025. And here you see that there is a date outside, a date further out than the past 12 months. So it's highlighted yellow, so they're out of compliance in completing the recertification. And that's why it's highlighted yellow. So usually when that happens, you'll have 30 days from the SRI approval to provide proof that the recertification has been completed. Okay, and then on to column H. So this is where you're going to enter the household income from the most recent recertification. Column I, you will be entering the current monthly tenant rent. And then for column J, so for column J, you're going to be entering the number of months in which the tenant will have their tenant rent remain the same as their current monthly tenant rent. So for example, this tenant here, their recertification will happen in July. So that means that the tenant will have their current monthly tenant rent for 6 months of the 2026 report year. All right, there we go. And if you have any more questions regarding this column here, you can, like I said, any questions, you can always reach out to your occupancy representative. Let's see, this is no place like home, so these generally won't be selected. Also for K, that is for LPR, so for no place like home, you will not be entering any information here or in any of these columns, L, M, or N, or O. So then for P, this is where you will enter the accessible unit type. So I've entered, for an example, this one is it has neither mobility nor sensor accessibility. So I put neither, and I put as an example here, the drop down you can put if it is a mobility only, if it is sensory only, or if it is both mobility and sensory, then you would enter it here. So if you have a tenant in the unit who is utilizing the accessibility, then you would say yes here. If it is a tenant that is not utilizing the accessibility type, then you would enter no. And if that is the case, then you would want to make sure to have in the tenant's file an accessibility unit waiver. And you would want to indicate that yes, you have that unit waiver in the tenant's file, or if somebody needing that ADA compliancy is needed. So that is where you would be putting these answers here. And then here's where you would enter the unit designation. So for the manager's unit, you would enter manager from the drop-down. And for the no place like home units, you would select no place like home. And then generally there are other funding types. And if that is the case, you could enter TCAC if the other funding is TCAC, or you could enter OR if the funding type is a different funding type. And then for T, you will be entering the regulatory agreements AMI. So for example, for no place like home, it would be 30% or under. I've entered those there. And for TCAC, it could be, it could be higher for TCAC or other restricted units. Let's see, if there was another regulatory agreement, let's say if it was no place like home with farm worker, then on this side you would enter the second regulatory agreement. Let me see, where's the farm worker? One second. How come I don't see farm worker here? Well, let's say it was an MHP for the second regulatory agreement, then you would just enter whatever that second funding program is. Okay, and then you would move along, and then also be sure if there is a second funding type to enter the AMI. And these two AMIs should be the same. They should never be two different AMIs for the same unit. And then moving forward to column AT, this is where you would enter the proposed new monthly tenant rent. For AU, you would enter if there's any subsidy on any given unit. In this example, these two units have Section 8 funding, so you would enter that here for the current monthly tenant subsidy. And then for the proposed new monthly rent subsidy, you would enter that here. And then be sure to utilize a drop-down to select what the project or rental subsidy, rent subsidy source is. And then for tab 3, this is where you will be entering the manager's unit. And is it as noted down below here? If the free rent of any on-site management employee is included in the project operating expenses, you would want to make sure to put the same amount, that the same amount is coming up here as is on the operational budget, the proposed budget. And I will show you where to find that. 1 second. Here we go. So on the operational budget, you will go to tab 172. And if you have the annual amount of 14,400 here under account 6, under account 6331, you want to make sure that this amount here is matching this amount here for the annual rent on that manager's unit that is being used as an operating expense. And oh, I did one quick other thing I forgot to mention regarding tab 2 is that if you are wanting a little bit more information on any of these columns, there are these little red corners that you could hover over and it'll give you more information regarding that particular column in case you need a little more information and helping you figure out what it is that you need to put there. So make sure to utilize that in case it is needed. And for tab number 4, this one is helpful to ensure that your unit mix is in compliance. You would hover over the yellow and right click and hit refresh. And then the unit mix will pop up so that you could reference it to your regulatory agreements unit mix to ensure accuracy there. And that concludes our presentation of helpful tips on how to fill out and complete the current SRI. And once again, if you are needing further assistance, you can always reach out to your occupancy representative who can assist you. Thank you.